Hello fellow readers, book lovers, and whoever else is watching this. I'm Emily at Midnight. Welcome to my channel. I have many genres that I adore. Sci-fi, fantasy, romance, literary fiction, but there's a cute new genre on the scene these last few years called cozy fantasy. I've heard that the definition of cozy fantasy has been traced back to Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree, but it might go back further than that, I'm not really sure. The idea behind cozy fantasy is that it's all feel-good stories, low stakes, focusing on characters and community. Ever since hearing about this new genre, I've been very curious about it, and so I've wanted to dive in, and I decided no better time than the present. So I picked up Can't Spell Treason without T by Rebecca Thorne on my flight home from Taiwan. If you want to know what I was reading in Taiwan, be sure to check out this video. I think it's in this corner, where I talk about the books that I read in Taiwan with my friend. But before we get into this book, I want to address the elephant in the room. I have a new setup here. I just got some lovely paintings that I really adore. This one's a little reflective, you can't really see it. And yes, one of them is sideways. I had a different vision for the layout originally, and this is what ended up making the most sense, so I need to get a new print. It's in the mail, it's just not here yet. So we've got a sideways picture for today. It's gonna be okay. And with that, I've just read my first cozy fantasy novel, so let's talk about it. First, let's start with an overview of the premise. The Goodreads description says, all Raina and Kianth want is to open a bookshop that serves tea. Worn wooden floors, plants on every table, firelight drifting between the rafters, all complemented by love and good company. The thing is, Raina works as one of the Queen's private guards, and Kianth is the most powerful mage in existence. Leaving their lives isn't so easy. But after an assassin takes Raina hostage, she decides she's thoroughly done risking her life for a self-centered queen. Meanwhile, Kianth has been waiting for a chance to flee responsibility. All the better that her girlfriend is on board. Together, they settle in Tawny, a town that boasts more dragons than people, and open the shop of their dreams. What follows is a cozy tale of mishaps, mysteries, and a murderous queen throwing the realm's biggest temper tantrum. In a story brimming with hurt, comfort, and quiet fireside conversations, these two women will discover just what they mean to each other and the world. So that's the description. Did it live up to the description? Kinda. I'm not sure that I can attest to the realm's biggest temper tantrum, but we'll get there. So we have Raina, the palace guard, who's been trained to be a lethal fighter since childhood, since the position of palace guard is inherited from parent to child. So her total loyalty to the queen, down to the loss of her life, is a given. Then we have Kianth, the Arcandor, which is the most powerful mage in the realm, bestowed this power and position by the Stone of Magic. We'll get into the world building later. Here's the deal, they both have a ton of potential and very different personalities in theory, but somehow the book doesn't actually give us that much from the characters. We hear their thoughts, but their thoughts are almost exclusively logistical about trying to open a tea shop, and we just really don't get to see how they tick.
Are you serious?
Even by the end of the book, I didn't feel like I'd been given enough of the characters to really understand or care for them, which made it hard to get invested in the story. For example, Kianth, the Arcandor, uses magic all throughout the book, and tells us in words that her magic is drawn through basically magic plumbing lines to the Stone of Magic itself. She does a whole bunch of renovation on the soon-to-be tea shop as a surprise for Raina, and she does it all through magic. But it kind of just comes off as, and then I did this, and then I did this, and then I was tired. Very tell, not show. Then about halfway through the book or so, we finally get a moment where she explains to us how she experiences the magic, because she's comparing her magic to dragon magic. And it's suddenly super interesting. And then it's over. That's the only showing instead of telling that we get with magic. And then from there on out, we're back to being told that she does magic and does magic again. It's just so disappointing because clearly this author is capable of showing us things, but she just doesn't. And even more infuriating is this book is all about Kianth and Raina's relationship, right? Well, the meet cute is saved as a little special episode at the end, after the epilogue.
Huh?
I really thought that we just weren't going to get a meet cute and we're just diving into them partially in their relationship. But then we do, and it's so cute. And even more frustrating is that after reading it, I cared about them so much more because I got to know them better and I really got to see how their relationship works. I do not understand why it wasn't placed at the beginning. It would have added so much to this book to have that understanding of them and that appreciation of them as characters placed at the beginning of the book rather than as an afternote at the end after the actual epilogue. Enough on that, let's move to the setting. Honestly, the setting is very lovely. Can't and Reyna settle in a town called Tawny, which, contrary to the description, does not boast more dragons than people. It's a tiny border town directly between the Queendom to the east and Shepara to the west, and is contested territory claimed by both of the rivaling countries. It also borders Dragon Country to the north, which is where the dragons come in. The town gets occasionally toasted by raiding dragons and isn't known as the safest location. And it's also the furthest north frontier that humans dare to venture. As you know, Canth and Reyna ran away together to start a new life and open what is essentially a bookshop cafe. It's a tea house and a bookshop/library. This bookshop is described so well and has such a cozy atmosphere, which is very fun. We follow Canth and Reyna as they build the tea shop out of what was an old bandit's den and are initially treated with quite a bit of distrust from the citizens of Tawny.
Boo! Boo!
But basically, as soon as they open, the whole town turns on its head and is super welcoming to them. I don't really feel that that turnaround was earned, but at the point that that happened, I was viewing it exclusively as a cozy little read, and so I wasn't bothered as much by that. As for the rest of the world building, I did find it a little lacking. The Stone of Magic, for example, is pretty confusing. It seems that the stone has all the magic and sends it along these lines to different areas that feel very much like plumbing pipes for magic. So depending on the size of the lines, you will have more or less magic in different areas. It's a unique idea, and I don't hate it. It just didn't feel very fleshed out and was a little bit confusing to me as a reader. Another aspect that I found odd was that the Queen of the Queendom is described as super cold-hearted and prone to extreme bouts of cruelty and selfishness. And everyone has a lot of open criticism of her for that, which just felt like a little modern of a sentiment. Like, medieval rulers weren't known for their kindness, fairness, or altruism. Look, I'm no historian, but I'm pretty sure that the average citizen had no expectation of even-keeled emotions from their rulers, and weren't really too aware of how their rulers' decisions affected them. I don't know, it just seemed like an extremely modern. Like, Reyna has a change of heart on her loyalty to the Queen when the Queen was willing to let a would-be assassin kill Reyna, a guard, rather than bargain with the assassin for a guard's life. And I just think that's how it would go in a medieval society. It just felt like a very 2024 take on medieval times to be offended that the Queen would let a guard die instead of herself when they're her guards. Okay, now for the plot. Sorry, my camera died, but we're back. We discussed that this book was written specifically to fit the new cozy fantasy genre, which is characterized by having low stakes, which are specifically not life and death. But I found that the stakes in this book are actually kind of high. Like, the world isn't ending, but Reyna leaving her job as a palace guard is described as basically signing her death warrant because the Queen is very vindictive and will hunt her down and her. So that's not low stakes for sure. But beyond that, the threat of living near Dragon Country doesn't feel like too high of stakes at first. It feels mostly like you just need to have good canals and get better at putting out fires really quickly. But somewhere between halfway and the last quarter of the book, the stakes rise considerably. I won't spoil it, but they learn more about dragons, and the safety of the town and maybe more come quickly into question. And that's where my biggest issue with the book comes in, with this higher stakes plot and the pacing specifically. To put it mildly, the pacing is just bad. The whole first half or more is about them finding a place to build their shop, renovating the place, finding supply chains for books and teas, and working with the local town to get their business up and running. Now, I actually spend most of my time online watching people renovate things on YouTube, so coming from me, this should carry some weight. That part of the book is so slow. The main driving factors for the book, if not the only driving factors, for more than half of the book is about just trying to get their shop set up. Now, that's the part of the book that I would say fits the cozy vibe, but it isn't well paced at all. And it gets worse, because all of a sudden out of nowhere, a high stakes plot emerges. They have to figure out a mystery about dragons, and the Queen's guards find Reyna. So suddenly, over halfway through the book, we have multiple life or death plots pop up that have to be resolved. The plot with the guards was at least set up, with Reyna early on acknowledging that her leaving her job could lead to the end of her life. But the follow-through of that thread just pops up out of nowhere with little to no lead-in and changes the tone of the book entirely. The plot with the dragons is even worse because the book has not been set up as a mystery or high-stakes fighting book, but it suddenly becomes both in the final hour, which really threw me as a reader off. I really felt like I'd picked up another book suddenly without noticing. Worst of all, the new action-packed, mysterious, and pretty interesting plot about dragons that gets introduced at the back half of the book, it doesn't even get resolved in this book. At all. I didn't even know reading this that this was going to be a series, especially because it was marketed as a cozy read. It really felt a lot like the author changed her mind on where she was going with this book partway through and introduced new elements just so she would have a reason to write a sequel. Needless to say, I was very disappointed with the ending. There are a few other things that really frustrated me with this book as well that I don't want to forget to touch on. First of all, the description on Goodreads is not actually very truthful to the book. I've already talked about the Tawny, a town that boasts more dragons than people line, but there's also a line about the queen throwing the realm's biggest temper tantrum, which I don't believe happens at all. She does hunt down rogue guards.
Get out or I'll call the guards.
But I could understand that, since presumably guards know a lot about the castle and the queen's top secret security. Okay, and more on that. This comment gets slightly into spoiler territory, so feel free to jump ahead to this timestamp. So Rhaena gets captured by Queendom guards out of nowhere, right? So in this scene, we are introduced to a bunch of guards that Rhaena knows pretty well and has worked with in the past. And a bunch of time is spent on her dynamic with them, even though they haven't been mentioned before and they aren't even relevant moving forward. So spending any time on them in the book was really just not important. But right before that scene, Rhaena comes up with a plan to prevent herself from being unalived, and this is how it's introduced. Rhaena tugged Kianth to the armchair beside the fireplace. The hearth was dark and empty, and the room was slightly chilled. She sat in the chair across from her partner, took her hand, and then Rhaena laid out her plan. By the end, Kianth's jaw was unhinged. She gaped at her girlfriend, a mix of adoration and horror on her face. It was an amusing combination. You've thought about this before. From the day I contemplated leaving, yes. There is no reason that they don't tell us the plan to save Rhaena in that moment, except for the sake of holding stuff back from us and creating a reveal. And that is just such a lame reason to not know what will happen. They give us a hint of what she plans to do, but when they say so-and-so told her her plan and don't tell us any of the details, it's not mysterious, it's just plain frustrating. Unfortunately, the plan isn't really even believable. This is your final spoiler warning. She basically tells the queen that she didn't really desert, she just went under deep cover to seduce the Arcandor and therefore get the Arcandor in the queen's pocket. It's, I don't know, weak at best. I don't think I would believe it if I were the queen, especially since Rhaena didn't report the plan to the queen before taking off, which apparently she thought about it before taking off, so that would have been a pretty good failsafe. But whatever. Okay, that's the end of the spoilers. Overall, I would just say this book felt like it had an identity crisis. Is it a cozy fantasy book about renovating an old barn and making a tea shop and dealing with the townspeople's troubles? Is it litfic about the people in the town plus a little bit of magic? Or is it a fantasy book with high stakes like dragons and treasons and generational feuds that could get the whole town killed? I think it decided to be a cozy magical story, but then halfway through decided to have big stakes and drama. It changed its mind on what kind of book it was and did it too late, leaving zero time to resolve anything and leaving me feeling confused. So that was my experience reading Can't Spell Treason without T, and my first foray into cozy fantasy as a genre. Now, I'm not sure if these are genre-wide issues or if I happen to pick a bad intro book to cozy fantasy, but I'll be honest, I'm kind of turned off to the genre. But if you feel like cozy fantasy has more to offer, feel free to prove me wrong and give me book recs in the description below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and please give this video a like if you liked it. And don't forget to subscribe. Feel free to follow my Goodreads, Instagram, etc., all of which are Emily at Midnight and are linked below. Also, if you're really into fantasy like I am, then feel free to check out my series where I read Harry Potter and Wheel of Time for the first time. Have a wonderful day, treat people with respect, and pick up a butt.